silence shrouded Fairchild Air Base like a funeral shroud. For 18 minutes, the radios had broadcast nothing but static and the distant rumble of diesel generators. In the operations center, General Everett Langford stared at the tactical screen where a single blinking dot had just vanished somewhere above the dusk Pine Valley. That dot represented Captain Marlow Kincade, call sign Ghost Rider. And according to every monitoring system in the room, she was no longer among the living. "General, we've lost all telemetry," murmured Chief Sergeant Kigan, barely audible. The last GPS signal showed the aircraft spinning out at 8,000 feet. No parachute deployment detected. Langford's jaw tightened. 3 months earlier, he had opposed Kincade's assignment to the 455th Expeditionary Squadron. Not because she lacked skill, her record spoke for itself, but because the A10 Thunderbolt 3 was, in his eyes, no place for a demonstration of parity. The Warthog demanded a special breed of pilot, brutal, relentless, able to merge with the machine itself. "Time since last contact?" he asked. 18 minutes, 43 seconds, sir." His eyes drifted to the mission board, where Kincade's name was already erased. Procedure dictated that after 15 minutes of radio silence in combat operations, the crew was to be listed as missing in action. The bureaucracy of war moved forward like a cold mechanism, even if it meant crossing out one of their own. But Marlow Kincade hadn't earned her call sign by following the manual. 12 years earlier, as a cadet at the Coast Guard Academy in New London, she had been trapped in a snowstorm, compass broken. Guided only by the stars and her determination, she had led her entire squad back to base. At dawn, her instructors had found her bent over celestial navigation charts while the other cadets still slept. Like a ghost carried by the wind, one officer had whispered, and the name stuck. Now, perched somewhere in the crystal-scarred mountains, that same tenacity was being tested in ways the Academy had never taught. The A-10's engines had gone silent 6 miles northeast of Firebase Gates. What the radars and consoles at Fairchild didn't know was that Ghost Rider was still alive. Suspended upside down in her ejection seat, 100 meters above a Taliban stronghold, she watched her enemies swarm the wreck like ants over spilled honey. Her survival radio crackled, but she didn't dare transmit. Not yet. If she'd fallen into this trap by veering off course to follow suspicious movements, then she'd have to find her way out alone. Below, the insurgents were already salvaging ammunition from her GAU-8 Avenger cannon and working around the Maverick missiles with unsettling efficiency. These were no mere peasants armed with Kalashnikovs. They were trained. Disciplined. They had been waiting for her. In the operations center, Major Celeste Armitage paced like a caged panther, eyes fixed on the empty space where Kincade's aircraft should have appeared. As the officer in charge of close air support, she had guided Ghost Rider through dozens of missions over the past months. She had seen the young captain develop an almost supernatural ability to read the terrain and sense the enemy's presence even before ground troops called for support. "Major, we need to launch a search and rescue mission," insisted Lieutenant Arlen, holding out a stack of procedures. Armitage raised a hand to silence him. Something about Kincade's last transmission bothered her. Beyond the standard Mayday, there had been a strange sequence, 27 Alpha 9 Charlie. It wasn't any known coordinate or distress code, but Marlow Kincade never acted at random. Every radio call, every strike, every maneuver was as deliberate as a chess move planned dozens of steps ahead. General Everett Langford stepped closer to the tactical screen, his weathered face outlined by the bluish glow of the monitors. "Major, your assessment?" he asked. "Sir, something's not right," replied Major Armitage as she scrolled through the flight recordings. Captain Marlow Kincade's aircraft showed no mechanical failure before the incident. Weather conditions were normal. She was conducting a routine interdiction mission along a corridor we'd secured twice this week. "And your conclusion?" "My conclusion, sir, is that Ghost Rider doesn't go down without a fight, and she never takes anyone with her without a reason." The general's face softened for a moment. Despite his reservations about women in combat missions, he had watched Kincade's gun camera footage often enough to recognize true talent when he saw it. The young woman was locking onto her targets with surgical precision and making the right tactical decisions under pressure. But talent doesn't protect against surface-to-air missiles, and it doesn't stop a failure from happening at the worst possible moment. "Major, I need you too," interjected Chief Sergeant Kincade from his communications station. "I'm picking up something on the emergency frequency. It's unusual." The operations center fell silent as Kincade adjusted his headset, his face concentrated. A sound came through the speakers that made every pilot present lift their heads. The whistle of wind through torn metal, then heavy breathing signaling someone in great distress. Beneath those barely perceptible noises was a pattern of clicks and pauses that suggested Morse code. "Someone's sending in Morse," whispered Sergeant Major Waker, the squadron's most senior pilot. "Hi." In the dusk Pine Valley, hanging by her parachute harness with a dislocated shoulder and 3 broken ribs, Captain Marlow Kincade was methodically pounding the survival radio key. She couldn't speak. Taliban fighters were less than 50 meters away, but she still mastered the old art every aviator learns at survival school and often forgets, Morse. Her message was simple and vital. "Alive, aircraft captured, enemy camp, coordinates follow." The numbers she sent were not random. They pinpointed exactly what looked like a large Taliban logistical hub, a weapons depot, communications equipment, and at least 30 men. Her crash was not accidental. She had been lured into a sophisticated ambush by adversaries who knew our close air support tactics better than we'd anticipated. But the attackers had made a crucial mistake. They thought neutralizing the aircraft would be enough to silence the threat. They had not taken into account that Marlow Kincade never considered herself merely a pilot. She was a weapons system. Lottie's was just her favorite platform. Suspended in the dark, as enemy voices drew closer, she began to prepare her next move. The fighters had seized the aircraft, not her. And those men, she thought grimly, would pay for that. Her survival kit made her dangerous: pistol, distress flare, combat knife, and above all a GPS transmitter capable of guiding our forces straight to that unknown enemy position. The hunters would become the hunted without even realizing it. Below, voices rose as her captors organized search parties to find the pilot they assumed wounded and helpless. They were half right. At Fairchild, the Morse transmission electrified the operations center. General Langford found himself rethinking everything he thought he knew about Captain Kincade as Major Armitage and the communications team decrypted the message. "Sir, she's alive," said Armitage. "She's operating in reconnaissance. These coordinates correspond to a camp that doesn't appear on any of our maps. If it's correct, it's the Taliban logistics center we've been searching for months." General Everett Langford scrutinized the tactical screen where the position reported by Captain Marlow Kincade was marked with a red icon. The site lay deep in enemy territory, ringed by ridgelines that made any insertion extremely perilous. "What's the turnaround time for a search and rescue operation?" he asked. "At minimum 6 hours to prepare an extraction properly, sir, provided weather remains favorable." 6 hours in hostile territory, with enemy forces actively searching for her. Kincade would be lucky to hold out 6 minutes, let alone 6 hours. All protocols recommended considering her lost, recording the loss in combat, and moving on to planning a strike against the camp she had just reported. Yet something in her Morse transmission suggested she did not intend to wait for rescue. The final part of the message had been brief but explicit: request, firing mission. "We will designate TRTS. Ghost Rider out." She was therefore requesting a strike on her own position. It was, Langford thought, either the most absolute act of bravery he had seen in 30 years of service, or utter madness, perhaps a bit of both. Sergeant Major Waker stepped toward the general, face grave. "Sir, I've worked with pilots like this before. She's not asking for a rescue. She's asking for support to complete her mission. Her original mission had been to provide close air support in Sector 7. That mission is complete. But with all due respect, I don't think Ghost Rider sees it that way. She found the enemy center we've been looking for months. For her, the mission has taken on a whole new dimension." Langford weighed his arguments. Doctrine clearly sets rescue priorities, but it is also explicit about exploiting a target. If Kincade could designate high-value targets in that camp, a precision strike could deliver a serious blow to Taliban operations in the region. The question remained, would she hold out long enough for it to be worth it? 15 minutes after transmitting her coordinates, the first Taliban fighter fell onto Marlow's parachute. Unfortunately for him, he found the canopy tangled in a branch a few meters off the ground. As the pilot watched from a camouflaged observation post in the rocks about 50 meters away, those cries of surprise alerted the rest of the patrol but also confirmed Kincade's worst suspicions. These men were not improvised locals. Their equipment was too sophisticated, their tactics too coordinated. Someone was funding and training this operation to a level that suggested foreign involvement. Using the night vision scope borrowed from her survival kit, she counted at least fighters moving through the crash area with military precision. They communicated by signals and wore night vision gear that rivaled American equipment. This was a professional military unit disguised as insurgents. Her broken ribs made every movement torture, but she forced herself to stay mobile. The camp below buzzed with activity. Vehicles arrived loaded with reinforcements and equipment. Whatever their plan, her accident had clearly accelerated their timetable. She pressed the survival radio key again, sending short bursts to limit detection risk. Camp active. Estimate, over 40 personnel, foreign advisor present. Heavy weapons confirmed. At Fairchild, Major Celeste Armitage relayed the information down the proper channels while tracking Kincade's intermittent transmissions. Each message sketched out the target that analysts had been trying to identify for months, but also highlighted the impossible position Ghost Rider had put herself in. She was conducting a solo reconnaissance mission against a fortified position. It was either brilliant or suicidal. "What's your read on her chances?" Armitage asked the general. She hesitated. "Sir, if any pilot in our fleet can pull this off, it's Kincade." "But probabilities don't matter," Langford interrupted. "What matters is whether we can effectively support her mission. Can we bring strike packages onto her coordinates?" "Yes, sir, but not without a significant risk of civilian casualties if she's mistaken in her assessment." General Everett Langford nodded gravely. It was the eternal dilemma of modern war: seize a tactical opportunity when every decision could become a catastrophic mistake. The intelligence provided by Marlow Kincade could save American lives by destroying a major enemy hub. But if she were wrong, if her injuries impaired her judgment, a precision strike could turn into disaster. "Establish a direct link to Ghost Rider," he ordered. "I want to speak to her directly." "Sir, a direct link increases the risk of enemy interception," objected Major Celeste Armitage. "Major, this pilot currently holds the most crucial reconnaissance of this rotation. She has the right to speak directly to her commander." The radio crackled with static. Then Kincade's voice came through, attempting but clipped. "Ghost Rider to Fairchild Actual, sending traffic." Langford found himself facing the pilot he had once wanted to reassign, a woman now risking everything to deliver information that could change the course of the operation. The irony did not escape the general. "Ghost Rider, this is General Langford. What is your status?" "Alive, in observation, sir. I've located what appears to be the primary Taliban logistical hub in this sector. Request permission to designate targets for immediate strike." Her voice maintained the same professional calm as during a briefing, as if requesting airstrikes while wounded and surrounded were just another afternoon at work. Langford then realized he might have fundamentally misunderstood what it took to be an ATA's pilot. It wasn't about physical strength or gender, it was about the ability to remain operational when everything collapsed, to turn disaster into opportunity, to keep fighting when others would have given up. Ghost Rider possessed those qualities in abundance. From her camouflaged post among the rocks, Marlow watched the enemy camp with a mix of dread and fascination. What she had first taken for a simple Taliban stronghold was proving far more troubling. The vehicles arriving through the night carried modern military equipment, not the gear of a guerrilla band: Chinese-made surface-to-air missiles, Russian radio links, Iranian explosive devices. This wasn't an ordinary depot but a coordination hub for foreign military assistance to Taliban operations across the entire sector. Her discovery could upend intelligence assessments of the conflict if she survived long enough to report it. "Fairchild Actual, Ghost Rider. Updating my assessment," she transmitted. "It's bigger than we thought." The general's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Go ahead, Ghost Rider." "Sir, I have visual on foreign military advisors and equipment from multiple nations. It looks like a multinational training center. At least 12 vehicles equipped with advanced weapons. I recommend immediate strike before they move their assets." The silence that followed lasted long enough for her to fear her transmission hadn't gone through. When Langford finally spoke, his tone carried a new, heavy weight. "Ghost Rider, you're describing a target with strategic implications. Are you absolutely certain of your assessment?" Marlow adjusted her night scope and studied the camp. Figures in uniform moved between the buildings and vehicles with military precision. Foreign advisors supervised the handling of sophisticated equipment. This was precisely the kind of evidence intelligence services had been seeking to document foreign interference in the conflict. Fairchild Actual, I'm certain. Request immediate strike mission coordinates. Negative, Ghost Rider. Stand by for extraction, we're sending a recovery team. Respectfully, extraction is not feasible from my current position. Enemy patrols are closing in. I recommend a strike mission while the targets remain stationary. Langford's dilemma was obvious to everyone in the room. Kincade had uncovered a treasure trove of intelligence, but exploiting it meant risking the life of the pilot who had found it. Military doctrine offered no clear rule for a case where the reconnaissance asset and the target were separated by only a few dozen meters. Major Armitage stepped toward the console displaying freshly processed satellite imagery. Sir, announced Major Celeste Armitage, we have confirmation of increased activity at Ghost Rider's coordinates. Multiple heat signatures, vehicle movement consistent with her reports. Extraction options. The terrain made any insertion or airlift extremely perilous, especially under combat conditions. Any rescue attempt risked additional casualties with no guarantee of success. General Everett Langford stared at the tactical screen, faced with choices where each carried unacceptable consequences: send a recovery team and risk more lives, launch a precision strike and kill his own pilot, or do nothing and let a priceless strategic opportunity, and one of his finest officers, slip away. Ghost Rider, he asked, what is your recommendation? The question stunned the entire room. Entrusting a strategic decision to a junior officer broke with every convention, but nothing about this situation followed convention. Marlow Kincade's reply was immediate. Sir, I can designate specific targets within the compound while maintaining relative cover. Precision strikes on the weapons depots will eliminate the main threat while preserving the site's intelligence value. Immediate mission authorization recommended. She was proposing to act as an improvised forward air controller, calling in strikes on a target whose survival would depend on split-second timing and surgical accuracy from aircraft she might never even see. Bold, dangerous, and completely in character for the pilot who had earned her call sign by navigating the impossible through sheer will and skill. Ghost Rider, target designation authorization granted. Strike package en route to your coordinates in 20 minutes. 20 minutes to identify targets, calculate safety distances and coordinate precision strikes while evading enemy search patrols. For most pilots that deadline would be unattainable. For Ghost Rider, it was just another challenge. She moved, seeking better observation posts. Her survival depended on the same qualities that made her an exceptional A-10 pilot: strict planning, precise execution, and an absolute refusal to give up. Despite the adversity, the Taliban fighters had expanded their search perimeter, methodically sweeping the ground around the crash site. From her new observation post, Marlow noted their discipline and coordination. Far from disorganized insurgents, they operated like a trained force, further proof that someone else had supplied them with very detailed intelligence on our flight paths, air capabilities, and tactical procedures. This camp was not only logistical, it was an intelligence hub that had been tracking our operations for months. Her survival radio came alive. Ghost Rider here. Falcon Leader, strike package of 4 F-16s en route, ETA 15 minutes. Ready to copy target coordinates. 15 minutes. She scanned the area through her scope and prioritized targets, first neutralized the SAM battery to prevent engagement of the fighters, then the communications center, then the weapons storage areas. The most crucial target remained the building where she had seen foreign advisors coming and going with briefcases and electronic gear, likely to contain intelligence of immense value on foreign interference. Falcon Leader, Ghost Rider. I have multiple targets for an engagement sequence. First objective, SAM battery at grid 27 Alpha 9 Charlie 4. Danger close, recommend precision guidance. Copy, Ghost Rider. Engagement danger close authorized. Note, our systems indicate friendly personnel at those coordinates. Marlow gave a bitter smile. The friendly personnel detected by their sensor was her, less than 200 meters from the objective she had just designated. In conventional warfighting, a danger close strike like that would never be authorized, but nothing in this situation was conventional. Calling a strike on her own position while wounded and surrounded followed a particular tactical logic. Falcon Leader, friendly forces are aware of the risk. Authorized. Fire on the first objective. The F-16s attacked from the northwest, their turbines barely louder than the wind sweeping the ridgelines. Marlow kept the SAM battery in her sights while assessing blast radii and fragmentation trajectories. Her position had to remain safe if the bombs hit their marks. Modern war relied on calculated risks. She had judged this one worth taking. The first bomb struck the SAM battery with surgical precision. The explosion washed the camp in violent orange. Marlow felt the shock through the rocks as secondary detonations set fuel and warheads ablaze. The Taliban fighters' voices rose suddenly, filling the air with confused shouts and orders. Their meticulously prepared operation was disintegrating. Falcon leader, excellent first hit. Second objective, communications building at grid 27 Alpha 9 or Charlie 6. Multiple antennas on the roof. Foreign personnel observed. Copy, Ghost Rider. We have the target, approach in 30 seconds. Through her scope, Marlow watched foreign advisors rush out of the communications building carrying briefcases and electronic gear. The documents and equipment they salvaged were clearly worth the risk. Even under bombardment they tried to save what mattered. The second strike pulverized the communications center, cutting the camp's ability to coordinate with other units. Still, the advisors had escaped with their most sensitive items into prepared shelters, proof they had anticipated this scenario. Ghost Rider, Fairchild Actual. Excellent work on the designation. We're seeing significant secondary explosions on satellite imagery. General Everett Langford's voice, filtered through interference, carried contained pride. The pilot he had wanted to reassign had just demonstrated tactical qualities that would have impressed seasoned air controllers. Fairchild Actual, the mission is not over. I have visual on high-value personnel evacuating sensitive material. I recommend a ground exploitation while the targets remain accessible. Negative, Ghost Rider, priority is your extraction. Helicopters are en route to your position. Marlow heard the distant rotors of the rescue craft, but she also made out Taliban groups massing around the intact areas of the camp. The foreign advisors were organizing a methodical evacuation to preserve their most critical resources. The true mission she had begun by crashing into the Dusk Pine Valley was not finished. Fairchild Actual requests permission to continue surveillance. High-value targets are still being extracted. The silence at headquarters lasted only until the helicopters established a direct radio link with her position. In her earpiece Marlow heard a cacophony of voices, air controller, helicopter pilot, ground commander, debating her status and the priorities. But the heaviest conversation was playing out in General Langford's head as he watched the satellite feeds of the camp she had found and struck. Analysts were already confirming that her designation had enabled the destruction of a facility they'd been seeking since the start of the deployment. Her interdiction mission, ostensibly routine, had taken on strategic weight beyond many battalion operations. Ghost Rider, this is the recovery team leader. We have your beacon in sight. Prepare for extraction in 5 minutes. Marlow looked down at the beacon she had activated, then back at the camp where foreign advisors continued loading vehicles. Her extraction would interrupt an intelligence watch that was producing, in that very moment, information of priceless value. She made a decision that would define her career. Recovery leader, Ghost Rider cancels extraction. I am moving to continue surveillance of the high-value targets. The radio burst into protest. Helicopter pilots, staff officers, everyone tried to countermand her, but Marlow had already turned off her beacon and begun moving toward a new observation post. The site below was too crucial to abandon, and for the moment she remained the only American asset capable of tracking the enemy withdrawal. General Langford's voice broke through the static. Ghost Rider. Formal order. Comply with extraction procedures. Sir, she replied calmly and respectfully, I am best placed to collect information on foreign involvement in Taliban operations. I request permission to continue the mission. The request flouted every rule regarding a pilot's evacuation, but it came from an aviator who had just shown exceptional tactical judgment under impossible conditions. General Langford faced the same dilemmas that had marked his entire career. When do you follow procedure to the letter, and when do you trust your subordinates to make the right call? Ghost Rider, what is your assessment of the mission's viability? He asked. Sir, I can maintain surveillance for another 6 hours. Enemy personnel are evacuating sensitive material that could provide unprecedented intelligence. I recommend postponing extraction to fully exploit the target. 6 hours in hostile territory with broken ribs and a dislocated shoulder while enemy search teams close in on her position, This was either the strategic clarity of a pilot who grasped the stakes, or the blindness of someone whose injuries were impairing judgment. Major Celeste Armitage brought updated intelligence that shed light on the situation. Sir, preliminary analysis of the strike damage confirms Ghost Rider's assessment. We've destroyed a significant foreign training facility. The personnel she's tracking could lead us to similar structures in the region. Langford stared at the tactical screen where Marlow Kincade's position glowed as a red icon deep in enemy territory. Regulations required immediate extraction. All the strategic calculations, however, showed that prolonged surveillance could prove invaluable. Ghost Rider. You are authorized to continue the surveillance mission, but I want a sitrep every 30 minutes and at the first sign of compromise. You call for extraction immediately. Copy, Fairchild. Ghost Rider continues the mission, she confirmed. A heavy silence fell over the operations center as everyone grasped the magnitude of the decision. He had just authorized a wounded pilot to conduct solo reconnaissance on an enemy position actively searching for her. It was either brilliant tactical flexibility, or recklessness with dire consequences. Sergeant Major Waker stepped forward knowingly. Sir, I've met pilots like her before. She doesn't just bring back intel. She hunts. And out there in the Dusk Pine Valley Mountains, surrounded by the enemy, fueled only by determination and professional pride, Captain Marlow Kincade has become a hunter. The camp below concealed secrets capable of reshaping the conflict, and she intended to uncover them all. Dawn crept over the Dusk Pine Valley like a reluctant witness, tinting the ridges in gray mixed with the smoke rising from the shattered camp. Marlow had spent the night tracking the foreign personnel evacuating their most sensitive assets, license plates, faces, serial numbers on equipment. Each detail could later be cross-referenced by analysts to map supply networks spanning multiple nations. Her broken ribs had settled into a constant but manageable pain. Her shoulder, silenced through improvised treatment, still allowed enough movement to handle a weapon. Above all, her mind remained sharp, dissecting data with the methodical precision that had made her an exceptional pilot. Around 3 a.m., the Taliban ceased their searches, apparently convinced she was either dead or had escaped. That mistake gave her freedom of movement. She managed to establish several observation posts throughout the valley, weaving alone a surveillance network covering the entire enemy complex. Fairchild Actual, Ghost Rider. Movement on the northern access road. A convoy of 3 vehicles departing the camp with high-value personnel. Requesting directive for continued observation. General Langford's voice responded without delay. Ghost Rider, maintain observation but do not engage. We're coordinating with intelligence services for a possible interception. Through her scope, Marlow watched the convoy climb the mountain roads with the confidence of drivers well familiar with the terrain. These were not hasty retreats but organized withdrawals, proof that the camp had been designed with contingency plans in mind. Fairchild Actual, the convoy is approaching the junction with Route 146. If they reach the main network, tracking will become much harder. At Fairchild, Major Celeste Armitage was coordinating with multiple agencies while intelligence units sifted through the material Ghost Rider had provided during the night. Marlow's observations had already triggered high-priority alerts and counter-espionage units across 3 countries. The foreign advisors she had identified were now the focus of an international TRX operation. But the immediate tactical situation hadn't changed. A wounded American pilot was conducting a solo surveillance mission against enemy forces in terrain where extraction was extremely dangerous. Ghost Rider, we're repositioning drones to track the convoy. Your priority should shift to exploitation of the camp while visibility remains good. Marlow nodded to herself, already heading toward the partially destroyed compound. The morning light revealed details hidden by night vision, Chinese inscriptions on scorched missile components, Russian serial numbers on communications gear, Iranian markings on explosive devices. The camp was not merely a training center, it was a multinational hub for studying tactics, equipment, and American forces. Her discovery would redefine intelligence assessments on foreign involvement in the conflict, if she lived long enough to report it. Fairchild Actual, I'm exploiting the site. Documenting foreign material and intelligence-relevant elements. Need guidance on collection priorities. Ghost Rider, photograph everything but do not compromise your safety to recover material. Personnel security comes before intelligence value. She answered with a wry smile. The moment she had declined extraction, personnel security had become secondary to mission accomplishment. Now, moving through the ruins while Taliban reinforcements could appear at any moment, her survival depended solely on speed and stealth. The foreign advisors had taken most sensitive items, but they'd left telling clues, instruction manuals in multiple languages, communications gear configured for American frequency bands. More worrying were detailed files on American pilots, photos, personal intelligence, items that could only come from a methodical intelligence operation. Her own photo was in there. Fairchild Actual, I was specifically targeted. This is not random engagement. They've been studying our personnel and procedures for months. The revelation sent shockwaves through the analysts. If foreign advisors held dossiers that detailed on pilots, it was likely similar intelligence existed for ground forces, support personnel, and staff officers. The scale of the leak could compromise operations across the theater. General Everett Langford's voice took on urgency. Ghost Rider, we're accelerating extraction. Helicopter package inbound, ETA 20 minutes. Copy, Fairchild Actual. I will continue documenting the site until extraction arrives. Yet even as she acknowledged it, Marlow knew 20 minutes might be too long. Vehicle noises now echoed along the valley approaches, signs that Taliban reinforcements were responding to the previous night's strike. Her window of opportunity was closing fast. She began photographing documents and serial numbers with mechanical efficiency, building a dossier analysts would spend months exploiting. Each shot could become a piece in a diplomatic puzzle that would occupy years of debate. The ruined compound offered many caches, but Taliban fighters familiar with the terrain would methodically search every shelter. Her survival radio crackled as the rescue helicopter drew near. Ghost Rider, this is the recovery team leader. We have your beacon and are 15 minutes out. Note increased enemy activity in your sector. Copy, recovery leader. I'm finishing exploitation of the site and will be ready for extraction. Through the blown-out buildings she saw dust clouds announcing the arrival of multiple vehicles. Taliban reinforcements had arrived faster than expected. Now she had to choose between finishing the intelligence collection and preserving her escape options. She chose to continue. The decision would have surprised her instructors at the Coast Guard Academy in New London, who knew her as a methodical, cautious cadet. It would have shocked the pilots who at first thought her appointment was political. It would not have surprised the enemies who had studied these operations and understood she was a target to be eliminated if possible. They now knew something her own command was only beginning to suspect. She did not see herself merely as a pilot or a soldier. She saw herself as a weapons system optimized to accomplish missions at any personal cost, and her mission in the Dusk Pine Valley was not finished. The first Taliban vehicles reached the camp perimeter as Marlow finished photographing the most sensitive document she'd found. Hidden in the ruins of the communications building, she watched fighters deploy with military precision around the installation they had spent months building. Their tactical coordination confirmed her hypothesis: foreign training had significantly strengthened the Taliban's capabilities. These were no longer the disorganized insurgents once faced by U.S. forces, but disciplined soldiers conducting operations to professional standards. Fairchild Actual, she transmitted. Enemy reinforcements have arrived at the camp. Approximately 20 men establishing a security perimeter. I'm camouflaged, but the extraction window is closing. General Everett Langford's voice crackled in her earpiece. Ghost Rider, prioritize your safety. We can analyze all the intelligence you've collected. Yet through her scope, Marlow saw something that changed the calculus. Among the reinforcements were 2 civilians carrying briefcases and sophisticated communications equipment. The foreign advisors had not fully evacuated, they had returned to recover material too sensitive to leave behind. Fairchild Actual, high-value targets have returned to the camp. Foreign personnel are attempting to recover sensitive equipment from the destroyed buildings. Silence fell at headquarters long enough for Marlow to fear her message had not gone through. When Langford finally replied, his voice carried the weight of a strategic decision that could affect the entire deployment. Ghost Rider, maintain observation, do not engage. We're coordinating with special operations units for a possible interception. Sir, the response time for special operations will exceed my extraction window, she argued. The foreign personnel will finish evacuating before additional reinforcements arrive, she warned, laying bare for headquarters the impossible choice that had guided him throughout the mission: follow procedure and let a strategic opportunity pass, or accept an exceptional risk for a potentially decisive reward. Ghost Rider, what is your assessment of the viability of prolonged surveillance? Langford asked. Through her scope she watched the foreign advisors directing the Taliban and the methodical recovery of equipment. Their coordination and speed suggested the intelligence value at stake justified the extraordinary risk she was taking. "Sir, I can maintain surveillance and document the recovery operations. The foreign personnel are prioritizing items that could point to other facilities or operations." The extraction helicopter was less than 10 minutes out, but the advisors were working efficiently and would likely finish before American Special Forces arrived. Marlow made another decision that broke every rule of safety and usual priorities. "Fairchild Actual, I am moving to a better observation post to document the foreign personnel and their recovery operations. Ghost Rider, stay at your current position. Do not compromise your safety." She was already moving, advancing undercover among rubble and blown-out structures, closing the distance with the foreign advisors while using the debris for concealment. These shots needed to be precise enough for analysts to identify faces and equipment, requiring proximity that doubled her exposure to danger. The irony was not lost on her. Wounded and with only her survival kit, she was conducting close reconnaissance normally assigned to special operations teams. Through the lens she documented faces, material, and procedures that could shed unprecedented light on foreign advisory operations. Each image could become proof of international interference capable of reshaping diplomatic relations and military strategy. The advisors operated methodically, they removed specific items and left others, showing they knew exactly what they were looking for.